What's going on, everybody? Here we are. It is Monday. It is December. It is December. Can you believe that? We've got Thanksgiving behind us, and we start that sprint into the holidays. So many good times associated with that, especially when it comes to memories in regards to gifts with cards. And I know we all can look back on some of the boxes that we got, or cards that we got, or packs, or team sets, or complete sets. A lot of good memories having to do with the holidays and our card collecting history. Now, this week, I had a question for you all that I thought was a pretty interesting one, and I thought is certainly worthy of our time and discussion, because I think that there's not a right or a wrong answer here. I really do believe that there's not a wrong answer. And some people are saying there is a right answer, there is a wrong answer. And that is, how much do grades matter when you're buying cards? I mean, I could make a really strong argument as to why grades absolutely matter. And I could make a strong argument on why grades absolutely don't matter. Now, where do I currently stand? I lean toward the fact that I think that grades matter too much to too many collectors. It's not that I don't think that they matter at all, you know? And the whole topic of, are cards properly graded? Is there consistency with grading? I'm not even going to talk about that or focus on that, at least that much today. To me, the question is really, do the grades matter when you buy the card? Will you buy the 7, or do you need it to be the 8? Do you need it to be the 8 in order to buy it? And there's definitely a discount, and the jumps in prices from one grade to the next. I mean, if you were to plot on a chart, you know, price to grade, there is a pretty direct correlation between what they sell for and what the price is, and the grade that they received, right? There is absolutely that direct correlation, with a few outliers here and there. Should it be that way? Maybe. My question was, what is it to you? Now, I think that your responses were fantastic. Sometimes when I ask a question, most people go one way and hardly anybody goes the other. In this one, I think that some of us will be surprised. There were several people who said, yeah, grades matter. They absolutely matter. And then there were several people that said they don't matter at all. And then there were some people that said, well, it's kind of complicated. It's somewhere in between. Now, I look forward to sharing those with you and getting your thoughts on that. But before I do that, I wanted to point out a card that my guy John sent me the other day. This is an awesome Donruss Studio 2004. You got the GOAT there, Mr. Clemens, in the Astros uniform. Card is numbered out of 100. You can see down there. It's like designed after like his driver's license, which is very, very cool. I love it. So thank you so much for that, John. And I still have about 15 or 20 of the Captain Midlife cards. If you're interested, hey, wouldn't this look nice under your Christmas tree or in your stocking? A Captain Midlife card right next to some top-end hobby supplies from the Penny Sleever. My guys at the Penny Sleever, thanks again for sponsoring this. Appreciate that. If you've not yet gone to thepennysleever.com, check them out. Again, high quality stuff. I really like the stuff that I have. If you fill out the form down in the description below, I will be sending you the Captain Midlife card and the Mr. Penny Sleever, both in supplies provided by the Penny Sleever. So thanks again for that. Time is running out, but it's not out yet. So take advantage of that. With that said, let's take a look at our very first question, or not question, our very first series of responses right here.
Now, some people said, yes, grades matter. This first one says, baseball, 1980s through present. I'm aiming for the grade. PSA 10s only. I find myself bidding way over comps just to get that 11.0 registry rating. This next one says, for next week's question, I can only answer for myself and my train of thought. Yes, I have to break myself from looking at the grade, and sometimes it is hard to do that because my OCD gets in the way and I keep everything the same slab-wise and grade. One example, all of my 1970 Hall of Fame rookie cards are SGC 6.5 or 7. I just want to keep it uniformed. And finally, this one says, I'm a Nolan Ryan super collector. When I decided to send off my entire Ryan collection for grading, I told myself as long as I receive a minimum grade of 5, I'd be happy. Fast forward a couple years, and now I'm upgrading my 7s to 9s due to centering. I can honestly say the number grade has influenced the way I covet cards. Sometimes I have purchased a card for the number, when I really should be okay with a fine-looking lower grade. The way we collect cards is always in flux.
All right, so there we go. Several responses in favor of grades mattering. And I do get it. I mean, if you are somebody who's into the set registry, and some of us go, set registry, who cares? Well, some people care. For some people, that's a fun competition, is being involved in the PSA set registry, putting your cards up there and seeing where your collection ranks. And adding a card that's an upgrade improves your number on the registry. And I could see how that would be fun. And I could see how, oh wait, if I pick up this card, it moves me up here. It's sort of a game within your collection that allows you to share your collection without sharing your collection. And that is definitely something that's appealing to a lot of collectors. Now, is it appealing to you? Maybe not. Is it appealing to me? Not really. I, at this point at least, don't have any of my stuff. I guess I have some of my cards on the registry, on the T206 Hall of Fame registry. But I have probably more of my cards from the T206 set are SGC, so they don't count. So it's hard for me to get too invested in it. But I did put them up there at one point just as a form of sharing them with other people and storing the images. But again, if you're not into the registry, that's fair. Now, another thing that I think that we have to consider, and it's not something that we want to really think about, is it's sort of like when I'm teaching my students. We do a unit in the personal finance class that I teach on life insurance. And I say, guys, this is not something that's fun to talk about. It's not fun to talk about death and the financial ramifications of when somebody passes away. But if you care about your family, it is something that you need to consider. And one of the things that I like about grading, one of the things, is that it allows you to have a generally accepted range of the quality of a card. Now, that doesn't mean every 7 is equal, but it does mean that the 7 is better than a 4 in almost every case. Not every case, but almost every case. It does mean that the 7 probably isn't better than a 9. So when somebody ends up with your collection someday, you want them to get the full value out of it. Even if the value doesn't matter to you right now, you have people that you care about that will end up with the collection, and they're going to need to liquidate it unless they're really into it. And if they liquidate it and the price is based at least somewhat correlated to the grade, then the grade definitely matters. It will allow them to liquidate it for more. Now, whether it means the card is better is different than whether the likelihood of them getting more money for it is higher. So in a certain respect, I do believe that getting cards with high grades allows it to have a potential for a higher sale than a lower graded card, because there are a lot of people who care about the grade, who Now, will the set registry be more important in the future? Maybe. Will it be less important in the future? Maybe. Will grades matter more in the future? Maybe. Will they matter less? Maybe. We don't know what the future holds. The crystal ball that I'm looking at right now, it does not say anything inside. It's not the magic 8 ball that I shake up and I look and it gives me an answer. That would be nice, but we don't know what's going to happen. So because of that, it does provide some protection, sort of like life insurance provides some protection. Greg, did you just call PSA's grades the same as life insurance? Well, not exactly, but kind of. It does protect your loved ones from potentially being taken advantage of when they go to liquidate cards down the road. It just does. Now, the other piece of it is if a lot of collectors, if the majority of collectors really do value the grade, and again, if you go online right now and you look up to buy a card in a PSA 10 versus a PSA 9, if you're going to look at a card in a PSA 6 versus a PSA 5, and you were to look at the actual sales prices, not in every single instance, but in the overwhelming majority of instances, the higher grade sells for more. Now, the other piece of it is, I'm as guilty as anybody, thinking that my cards are fantastic, and every time I send in a card, it gets undergraded. Again, I'm not looking through it at high definition. I'm not looking at it with it heavy magnification. I'm looking at it from just the pure enjoyment of the card. Oh man, that's a cool looking card, isn't it? I say to myself. Well, the person who's going to be evaluating it, they don't care. Just like the guy who comes and does the home inspection when you sell your house, or the person who does the appraisal when you sell your house, he has no emotional attachment to the item. The house has no emotional attachment. We all think our house is great. But guess what? It might not be. And the guy who is evaluating it from a third-party perspective, he doesn't really care what it's worth. So if he doesn't really care what it's worth, he's going to give his opinion, whether we agree with that opinion or not. Now, in a lot of cases, the technical grade is going to be different than the eye appeal. And some people want cards with eye appeal. And some people want cards that are technically better. And so when you see a 7 that, maybe doesn't have the eye appeal that you like, and then you see a 4 that has all the characteristics that you do like, you would go, this 4 is better than the 7. And in your eyes, through your threshold of what matters to you, it probably does. But that doesn't mean that it's actually better than the 7. It means it's more appealing to you. And I believe as collectors, we should probably be spending the money on what we like. So that's the way to go. But not everybody collects that way. Some people want to collect the finest specimen, and they look at it as a specimen. And the specimen is, how does it rate on this scale? And if it's 70-30 centering, which bothers you, you need it to be within, 55-45. But all the other aspects of that card that are 70-30 centering are fantastic. The specimen that's better might be the 70-30 card. It just might not be as appealing to your eye. So I do think that the technical grade matters. I do think that a lot of collectors prefer a card with a better technical grade. And I think that it does provide some protection for whoever ends up with the cards after you're no longer enjoying them. So do grades matter? I do think that they matter. Now, they matter more to some people than they do to me personally, but that doesn't mean that they don't matter. Now, it's going to sound today like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but all I'm doing is playing devil's advocate for both sides as we go along. That said, the second category of people there were several that responded this way is grading. I don't even want my cards graded at all.
Now, some of us say, don't go for graded cards, buy raw cards. Grading is not the answer. This first one says, enjoyed the video. I don't care about grading. I buy the cards I want and want to possibly touch. Condition is semi-important. I do want to enjoy looking at it. Always collect what you like. I own a couple PSA cards only because they were a good deal, and I wanted the card anyway. I call slabs card coffins. And another comment says, I am 100% about the grade. I have no graded cards. I have a small and very specific collection. Some of the old, beaten up, well-loved cards are my favorites. They tell a better story. And finally, this one says, if someone says buy the card, not the grade, then essentially only buys graded cards. I think this is pretty hypocritical. 99% of cards out there don't require authentication. If someone truly only cares about the card, then they should study the cards they want and buy a beautiful raw copy at significantly reduced prices, right? In my opinion, the grading industry relies heavily on the fact that there is a hive mind effect in the collecting community as a whole, that grading is absolutely critical. I buy beautiful raw vintage 4s through 6s all day at 40 to 60% of graded versions that look worse, so the current state of the hobby benefits me. The key was taking the time to understand the sets and what to look for, and not buy into this grading hysteria.
There is absolutely something cool about just holding an ungraded card. Now, when that last comment said it's like putting it in a coffin, yeah, I mean, I get it. It is encapsulating it. It is no longer allowing air to penetrate it. We are not able to physically touch the card itself. And there's something cool about physically holding something in your hand that old. Now, you guys know I collect these pirate cards from 1888, Allen and Ginter. I talk about them all the time. I pick them up whenever I can. And most of the ones that I pick up are already graded. I bought a raw one the other day off of eBay. And it came in, and the first thing I did is I took it out and I held it raw. I held it in the flesh. And I smelled it. Is that weird that I smelled the card? I don't know. Probably it's weird. I don't really care. I wanted to smell it. Why? I'd never smelled one before because all the other ones had been encapsulated. I really could see it without any sort of barrier. And the shine and the vividness and the brightness, it's better. It's better looking at it raw. So I definitely understand that. I also understand not wanting to spend some of your hobby dollars on getting cards graded, wanting to spend your hobby dollars on the hobby, on actually getting cards. I understand that. I also understand that a lot of people aren't interested in buying cards that are ungraded. And because they aren't and the demand is lower, the price is generally a lot more beneficial for us as collectors. But there is an inherent risk. There is a risk of authenticity. Well, if you're well-versed and you know what you're doing and you've been around for a while and you know which things to look for, you'll pick up a lot of it. But at the same time, I was at a show, I don't know, a few months ago, and I was talking to a dealer who had a Wayne Gretzky rookie card. And he was like, I don't know, do you think this is real, Greg? And we looked it over really good, and I'm pretty confident that it was a counterfeit. And he wasn't sure. And he's been in the hobby for 40 years. And neither of us were 100% sure. I'm about 99% sure it was fake. Now, those are two people who've been around the hobby for quite a while. It had a lot of the right characteristics. But there are going to be times that we might miss something, that we don't see something. There is a risk there. The other risk is back to what I was mentioning earlier. when your loved ones go to sell it someday, there's going to be that unknown of how would it grade? How would these come back graded? If they would come back graded well, then it changes the value positively. But the person that's going to be looking to buy that collection of ungraded cards off of your family member, they're not going to be able to give them the same sort of price. Or I don't think that they would. Most dealers wouldn't, because of the risk involved for the dealer. So in order to maximize the value, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, a lot of cards, if you grade them, it could add value and it could add a protection for whoever is going to inherit your collection. So do I like holding raw cards? Yes. Do I have a lot of cards that are currently ungraded? Absolutely. A lot of my cards from like the 80s and the 90s that I pick up, Don Mattingly Topps rookie and, 85 Topps Eric Davis rookie and cards like that from my youth that I grew up with. I have a lot of those cards are not graded right now. And the reason is I like them ungraded. And I don't really need to protect myself or my future people who would receive them, family members that would receive them, because the difference between them being graded and being ungraded isn't really that much. So I just assume leave them ungraded and keep the money instead. So I do understand this perspective. It is very special to hold a card without any sort of barrier, but just physically hold the card itself. It is really, really cool, and I completely get it.
One comment that caught my attention is how he evolved on grading. It says, for most of my collecting years, once there was grading, I wanted the highest number I could afford. I depended a little too much on the number once there was grading, though I did try to judge the card for myself. PSA developed a standard that was needed in the hobby, as before they existed, it was the Wild West. My desire for a high grade has been tempered these days, as I am buying mainly pre-war, and am happy to get a nice-looking card even if at a 1.5. Eye appeal has taken over the hobby, but I am happy with a card that may be a little off-center but has great registration. I have had to allow flaws I would have never even considered because of the rise in prices. I still check the number, but now decide first by the price and second a card with the fewest flaws I can tolerate. If you listen to YouTube, you would think the hobby desired a low number with good eye appeal being more important than getting a high-graded card. If you follow the large auction houses, this is not the case. They have no problem selling tons of high-numbered cards. If I had that kind of money, I would be buying the highest number and the lowest populations available for sure. You're lying if you say that you're not checking the prices on your cards regularly.
I love this comment so much. I love the honesty in it. I love the fact that a lot of us sometimes don't want to admit that maybe the way we used to do things or the way we're doing things now isn't the best way of doing it. And we evolve and based on the information that we have at this time, right? If you have all the information right now at this time, you make the best decision according to what you believe to be the best decision. And there are times where more information comes in, or more life experience, or more education, or more understanding comes in, and you go, maybe that wasn't the right way. I'm going to go this way. And that's okay. It's okay to change your mind. If we never changed our mind on anything, we're not really growing. Now, that's not to say that everybody's wrong on everything. There's a lot of things that I think we have opinions on that I think are probably pretty solid opinions. But there are some things where maybe those opinions are just not fully informed. And we need to be open to being wrong from time to time. And I've changed my opinion on things in the hobby. And I love this sharing of experience on how he changed some opinions. You know, I was talking to my buddy Tony, Southern Collector 14, the other day on the channel. And he was talking about, yeah, when I first got back into the hobby, I wanted to get the highest grade I could. And so we bought some cards that had high grades. And now, after being back into the hobby for a couple of years, he's like, yeah, I probably wouldn't have bought this card now. Because his information has changed. And one of the things that I think is, if you're new and coming into the hobby, and you see this card has a professional 8 on it, and a professional company put a 6 on this one, and you're kind of new to the game, who are you to say that the 6 actually might be better than the 8? The other piece of it is, a lot of the time, the 8 is better than the 6 from a technical perspective. But a lot of us don't collect from a technical perspective. So a lot of us maybe did collect from a technical perspective, but now we just want to collect with an eye appeal perspective. Or maybe right now people are collecting at an eye appeal perspective, and they're going to go to the technical perspective. There's not a right way to do this, and I continue to say this, and it's okay to continue to evolve. And I think the thing that you'll see the most, I think that a common theme that at least I seem to see, is that people that are newer in the hobby, and this is a generalization, which I don't really like to do, but generally speaking, a lot of people that are kind of newish to the hobby, they are more willing to accept the number on the slab. A lot of these young collectors, the reason they're obsessed with 10s is because they're kind of new. They don't really seem to fully understand yet that in some cases a 9 and a 10 is pretty much the same thing, and in some cases the 9 is actually better than the 10 because mistakes do happen. But I think that the most seasoned collectors, if you look around the YouTube community, if you go to the old guy at the card show who's been around and he's got his rubber bands around his stacks, he's been around forever. Most of those guys have been around for a really, really long time. Those tend to be the people who care the least about the number on the slab. They are more about the rarity, and they are more about the eye appeal. And the people who are newer to the game, they tend to concede their opinion to the grading company. Now, if you're out there and you've been around for a long time and you like the number on the slab, I'm not saying that you're wrong, because I don't think you are wrong. I don't think you are wrong. I will continue to say this, and this is a thing I've said 5 times already. I'll continue to say it, is there is a technical score, and then there is a what your eye likes to see. And those things sometimes are similar, and those things are sometimes different. And so when under the heavy magnification, and it's the way to think of it is more of like a diamond. Okay, think of it as like a diamond, right? You know, you'll see 2 diamonds. I remember shopping for my wife's diamond ring, and there was this one diamond, and it was big. It was a carat and a half. I remember this. It was a carat and a half, and next to it was a diamond that was like 1.05 carats. And they were the same price. And I bought this ring almost 22 years ago. And I remember they were the same price, and I'm like, that one's massive. That one's way smaller. And they go, yeah, but look. So they hooked me up to the little microscope thing. They put the diamond in there and go, see this one? See how it's a little foggy, the diamond? And you see how this one has a couple of little inclusions, little black dots in there? I'm like, oh yeah, it does. And they go, okay, let's pull that one out. And let's take this other one and let's put it in. And we looked at this other one. And I looked at it, and it was like pure clear. it had more sparkle. It didn't have any of the little inclusion things in there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that one's amazing. So which one do you want to buy? And I'm like, I think I want the really nice one, the perfect one. And they said, okay. But a second ago, I'm like, how could that little one be nearly as good as that bigger one? How could they be the same price? Well, from a layman's person walking up, me and the layman's person looking at them, I go, that one looks way better than that. That one looks big. This one looks small. And then once they educate me, and once we look at it literally with high-powered magnification, just like this, they explained, well, this is the reason this one's better, because this one has this, and this. And I think in a lot of cases, that's the same thing with cards. The eye appeal is the bigger diamond that's not quite as clear. The clarity is a little foggy, and it has a couple of inclusions. But the PSA 10 is like the perfect specimen. And so what are you collecting? And it's okay to collect the perfect specimen. But it's also okay to collect the one that from the naked eye looks fantastic, but under heavy magnification might have some issues. How you want to collect is completely up to you. Now, I've got a few more comments that I wanted to share, so let me share those here, and then I'll give you some final thoughts, and I will share my question for this upcoming week.
Now, for some of us, it's just kind of complicated. This first one says, I guess, as with most folks, it's a combination of the two. I am happy enough to find an ungraded copy of a card that I'm looking for my PC, but don't turn my back on cards I come across that seem like a good deal for the price at the grade. I will tend to look at graded card deals more often to resell to help fund my PC. I do have ungraded and graded cards that are not in great condition, but were at prices I was comfortable with. Some with stories attached, and others just there as fillers till I could either afford or find a copy I'm happy with. It would be difficult to paint the entirety of the collecting community with the same brush, but I reckon that the bulk of newer folks to the hobby tend to focus more on the grade, as there is much more information available at their fingertips now. Having collected since the mid-'80s, a lot of lessons were learned by Hard Knocks, as early on we had to rely on the honesty of other collectors or dealers, or somehow come to a consensus on the condition of a card we were haggling over. The appeal of grading is undeniable, but I think that the importance of authenticating a card versus determining condition got lost over the years. My friend Dan at Dan's Vintage Baseball PC says, another great video, extremely thoughtful and well-balanced replies from Midlife Nation. With regard to the new question, my answer is yes. Seriously though, it really depends upon your reason for collecting a particular card. If the card is a pre-war SGC 1, but with a pop under 10, the number grade is completely irrelevant. But if it's a player run, like my Seaver collection, where I only want high-grade cards, then the number is obviously relevant. Ultimately, it's really always going to boil down to eye appeal. If the card doesn't speak to me, or if I can't unsee an obvious flaw, I am not going to acquire the card regardless of the number. This one says, great question for this week. I personally feel like I'm guilty of buying the grade, but it's not what you think. I identify a card that I want to buy, then I usually find one in a grade I would like to have. From there, I begin searching for cards a grade or two lower than that, but look like they could have easily been the grade I desired. For example, I would find a 54 Ted Williams in a 3-4. Then I look for that card in a 1-2 that has great eye appeal. I find that I can often get the card I want in a grade lower for cheaper. But I don't feel like I'm sacrificing my card morals or standards to get the card. The key is patience. If you can be patient, you can always find what you're looking for in a lower grade, leaving money to get more cards. And finally, this last one says, Greg, I just got burned from buying a raw 1975 Bob Gibson last card off eBay that ended up having a crease that was not disclosed. Of course, asking for a refund. The corners were sharp and the centering was great too. So I thought I was buying the grade, not the card. Lesson learned, and I think I should stick to graded vintage cards on eBay. I would have been fine with a PSA 5 there instead. Thanks.
All right, so I thought there were some fantastic thoughts in there, and I really wanted to include those comments because I think each provided something important, but I didn't really have a category to put them. So all of these were kind of like, it's not that the grade doesn't matter, but it's not that it is the only thing that matters. And it's sort of somewhere in between there. It's just kind of complicated. But there was one comment from my friend Dan who really stuck out to me. Two things he said in his comment that really stuck out to me. Number one, he said, when you're talking about like a pre-war card, if you're talking about a turn of the century card, and maybe even a under pop 10 card, there are, maybe 10 known to exist of this card. At that point, I think the grade is kind of out the window. The existence of the card itself is pretty unbelievable. It's sort of like, some artifact, if you went to if you went to some museum, right? And you go to the Smithsonian. And you go to the Smithsonian and they come back and there's here's a perfect example. Here's a perfect example. When California was founded in 1848. How do I know that? The only reason I know that is because in 1998, its 150th anniversary, there were some things that they did in California. Well, one of the things they did near me was up in Gold Country. They had a big exhibit, and at the time, our mayor was Pete Wilson. And Pete Wilson gave a speech, and it was this big thing right in Coloma, which is this little town in the foothills where gold was discovered by John Marshall. And they had all this exhibit there, and they had, the governor spoke, and I don't know why my mom dragged me to this, but I ended up at this thing. And when I was there, they had a little exhibit that the Smithsonian was a traveling exhibit from the Smithsonian. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I walked in, and under glass, there was this glass box. And on the glass box, there was like a red velvet pillow. I said pillow once, and somebody made fun of me in the comments. A red velvet pillow. I call it a pillow, but so anyway. So on it was the actual piece of gold that when he discovered gold, he yelled Eureka. It was that nugget. And let me tell you, it wasn't that big. It was maybe the size of a sunflower seed kernel. And it was cracked in half. And I didn't think to myself, oh man, it's cracked in half. That thing's junk. Just, scrap it. Put it in go smelt it. I mean, it's still an amazing artifact. Well, when there's a card that there's only like 4 of, another example is the Honus Wagner, right? There are some of those Honus Wagner T206 cards that are absolutely thrashed. But you know what? It's a Honus Wagner T206. And because of that, it's special that it exists at all. So I totally agree with Dan that grade goes out the window when it's a very, very rare card. The other thing he said, which I think is a really, really good piece of advice for collecting. He said, unless there's a flaw that I can't unsee. There have been many times that I found a card that I've been looking for, The price is right. The condition is right. I love it. But there's something about it. Maybe a mark on his face. Maybe a big fisheye that's just standing out over to the left. Maybe this one corner is just weird looking. Something that I can't get over. If you can't get over it immediately, you're not going to be able to unsee it. So there's going to come times in your life where you're out there collecting and you're out there in the wild and you think you found the card, and then bang, you notice this thing, this flaw on the card that you don't want to bug you, but it bugs you. And you say, nah, I'll get over that. That's not going to bug me. It's not going to stop bugging you. So don't buy it. My piece of advice is, if there's anything that bugs you and you think you're going to get over it bugging you, you're not going to get over it bugging you. You're never going to be able to unsee that flaw. I think it's a fantastic piece of advice. I completely agree. And there have been many, many times I've been on the verge of buying a card that I really wanted, but there was something I couldn't unsee. And I didn't buy it. And never once do I look back and go, man, I really should have bought that card where he had the big black splotch on his eye. I've never said that. But there have been times I bought cards and gone, I wish that wasn't there. And you know what I've done every single time? I've sold it every single time. So I think that's great advice. Now, my question for you all this week is, now that we're into December, we got on the midlife logo at the intro and the exit today. The Christmas lights have shown up on the logo. And that means we are barreling down to holiday season. So my question for all of you this week is, as we start preparing for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holidays it is that you celebrate, as we barrel down on the holiday season, my question for you is this. If you had one card that Santa was going to bring you, what is the one card you really, really hope that Santa brings? Now, there's a lot of stuff out there that we all want. There's a lot of stuff out there. So narrow it down to one. Share with me the one card you hope Santa brings this year. And I look forward to sharing a bunch of them with all of you next week.